Hey friends, this is Marilyn from Tarot Clarity. So today's installment is the Bolognese tarot decks, and I'm trying to focus on the earliest examples that I personally own. I may have others that are earlier, but I just did a perusal as well as I could to find the ones that I know are from Bologna and I think that are the earliest. Now, bear in mind a few things. I'm getting older, and things that I used to know off the top of my head regarding tarot and other things are beginning to slip away. So please bear that in mind. If I make a faux pas, forgive me. I'm not doing it intentionally, and I've never promised to be a historian or anything like that. I'm just somebody who loves tarot. I've been reading tarot for over 50 years now. This is my 51st year. And I've been collecting ever since that point. So I have a lot of tarot decks. And bear in mind that more modern decks that might have come from the Milan region or the Venetian region or the Florentine region or the Bolognese or the Piedmont, I haven't gotten to that one yet. Bear in mind that as I realize I have a modern deck from those regions or a more modern deck, I'll add them to the respective playlist. But for these videos that I've been doing in recent days, I'm trying to focus on the earliest known decks that I have from those particular regions. I also apologize for not wearing my glasses, so I may not see things really well. They're in this room. They're in this room, which is like 10 by 10, if that, I guess about 10 by 10. Can't find them. They're in here somewhere. So if I have a hard time seeing something or if I don't see something properly, please forgive me on that. So how do you know when you have a Bolognese deck? Traditionally, if you have a tall and slender proportioned deck, you probably have a Bolognese deck in your possession. They're taller and narrower. Even the really modern, I think this is a Del Negro deck, even a more modern Bolognese tarot deck are still long and skinny. Why did they make them that way? That was the way they did it. Who knows why? Who knows why anybody does anything? For the decks that I'll be showing today that I know are Bolognese, and I think I have them and I'll flip the camera so you can see them, better. But I'm showing you the boxes now, and I'm not ready to flip the camera. I do have more than one copy of the Dalla Torre, but I'm using the larger of the two in this comparison. And this one I can't read, but I think it says the International Museum of Tarot, and put this one out. It's in a nice box. I do have another one published by Marco Benedetti, which is much more petite. I do have the Metelli, which I love my Metelli, and it's also a Bolognese deck. But like the Solabusca out of wherever it came from, whether it's from Venice or whether it's from Florence, it stepped to the beat of a different drummer. And although not to the same extreme as the Solabusca, Metelli was an innovative, creative artist, and he created a game. He created a deck of cards for the game of Tarocchino, remember, which was an abbreviated deck, missing cards 2 through 5. And the deck, if you have this one by Marco Benedetti, he created cards 2 through 5 to make it more palatable for a modern day person, to interpret the cards. But bear in mind that this particular deck would not have had the 2 through 5. And to be honest, I don't know if that was done for the Dalla Torre. I don't know. I don't think it was, because I don't think the 2 through 5 were missing. I don't think they were from the Dalla Torre. And the Tarocco Bolognese Al Mondo, I think, has 2 through 5. Yeah. And I don't think they were recreated. if I'm incorrect, bear in mind that I could be incorrect. They could have been created for the deck for modern people, but I don't think they were I don't think they were missing. And then I also am showing the, well, here's the El Mundo by Marco Benedetti. Here's the Tarocchino al Soldato. So this one, Tarocchino, if it ends in Eno, then you know it's missing cards 2 through 5. And I don't think Lo Scarabeo bothered to create cards 2 through 5. I think they just let it be. I think it's just more of a historic reproduction, not for tarot readers to use. Now, I also have an example of Angelo Valla, which, for those of you who may have the Marshmallow Tarot, the Marshmallow Tarot created in recent days does not have the elongated shape, but it was based on, the Marshmallow Tarot was based on the Angelo Valla Tarot of Trieste. And I believe the date on this is 1790, I think, the Trieste, or the one that the Marshmallow Tarot is based on, 1790. And I have the Zoni, which kind of is, similar to the Angelo Valla, and that's 1780. And as I mentioned, I do have a modern day playing deck from Del Negro, which just has, it's for modern players, that's all. So let me flip the camera, and I wanted to show you the boxes. Did I show you the Zoni? And then the Angelo Valla deck came in when I purchased, it was created in Germany. And it came in a well. And it's all written in German. The whole thing is written in German, so I have a disadvantage on that because I don't speak German. All right, so let me flip the camera and get started. Now, in the order of appearance, I'm not 100% positive, but I think that my Fina della Torre might be the earliest of the cards that I have here. I think it might be. I know that the Metelli is dated around 1650. So the Fina della Torre is either around the same period of time or a little bit earlier. And the Metelli is much less traditional, I think, than the della Torre, for reasons I mentioned. Then I'm also showing the Carte Fine al Mondo, which I don't think, this one is published by Marco. I don't think we have a date. Let's see, I don't have my glasses. It has to be prior, it has to be after 1725, okay? And he's got it before 1770, so somewhere between 1725 and 1770. And the reason we know that, for reasons you'll see in a minute, are that in place of the female pope to the pope, we have the four Moors. So we have a difference in cards there, okay? And then, which is the same case with the El Soldato, and I think even in the most modern playing card deck, they don't show them as Moors, they just show them as, but they're not the traditional female pope and all that stuff. Okay, now, interestingly, even though it's prior to 1725 when Metelli did his deck, he also had the initiative. Perhaps he saw the writing on the wall. Maybe he didn't want to be censored or whatever because maybe things were starting to get tricky. He, in his deck, before 1725, decided to replace those four cards. And then we have, like I said, the Zoni and the Angelo Valla. Okay, so let's take a look at the Della Torre. So, and then another thing, aside from having elongated formats, you'll see a lot of red dots in the Bolognese tarot decks. And there's a lot of conversation about what they're from. I'm not getting into a pissing contest with anybody about what the red dots mean. Personally, I just try to think of things like logically and common sense. I know that the cards would have been created like in layers, like a top layer, a back layer, and a middle layer. And I'm wondering if it was like dabs or daubs of glue to just secure the layers of cards, a paper, but I don't know. But that just is me. So in the respective order, Dalla Torre, Al Mondo, Al Soldato, the modern day playing cards. So from the modern times, and now you'll notice that they're one on each, so that the cards, it's irrelevant whether it's inverted or not. It just makes it easier. Bear in mind this was used for playing cards, right? For playing the game. So bear in mind though, look at it. There's not much difference between them. And it's interesting because all the red marks here don't seem like they're daubs of glue at all. In fact, maybe some of them are, those dots, there. But it seems as though they took the opportunity to give flourishes. So maybe they gave flourishes to the daubs of glue, because they figured maybe they knew that they would come through. So they figured, well, they might as well be decorative. Although I don't know why they would have turned out pink. So I think these marks, at least that we're seeing on these three decks, are intentional. And there's not a lot of difference. I mean, from 25, 1650 to 1750, in that 100 years, they pretty much stuck to the same formula. Now I'll show the Metelli also, but he is different from 1650. Now, it could be argued that this guy could be seen as the Fool because there's a tradition of music, right? We have, he's like a one-man band with his drum and his horn. He's making music. He's coming through town making music. In this representation, this guy he's shaking a tambourine. But he has the audience of children that I don't think we usually see with the Fool card. That's not true. There's an audience of Fool card. There's an audience of children in the Charles VI who are taunting the Fool. And in another one that I showed when I was showcasing, it might have been the Air Col d'Esti. Could have been. But here we have the element of music and children. But here we have just a single person going through town. He's disheveled. He's got a feather in his cap. I tend to see this one as the Fool. But I think it's been argued by others that it's not. And I'm not going to get into an argument with anybody because your guess is as good as mine. But I just wanted to point it out. But I do think that I see this, when I interpret using this deck, I see this as the Fool and I see this as the Magician because he's entertaining children. But I see him as the Fool, even though he's not making music in the tradition of the others. So then we have the Magician. This could be the Magician of the Metelli, as I mentioned, I'm not sure. But even in the early deck of Dalla Torre, the Magician has a table, he's doing sleight of hand tricks, and he's entertaining children. As he is in the Al Mondo, almost exactly the same recipe. And now we even have, and now you see these dots. Now these dots seem less decorative than those dots. But I don't know, maybe they took the opportunity of just being decorative with the glue. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. And then we have the El Soldato. And even to the modern day deck, the recipe hasn't changed, at least from the part that we see above the table. We see the two kids behind, a fella who's manipulating things on a table. He's got the same style of hat. And in the cards that show below the table, the kids are even in the same exact posture. Now, I'm not wearing my glasses, and I'm seeing it through the lens of the camera, so I may not be seeing everything. Now, in the Fina della Torre, we have the female pope, we have the empress, we have the pope, the emperor rather, excuse me, and then we have the pope. So we have the same canon of cards as we saw in the, what might have been the Milanese, what might have been in the, the Florentine, and what might have been the Venetian, right? So this has to be before 1725, but I think it's a lot earlier than that. I think it's probably 1620 to 50-ish, something like that. So we have those typical cards that we're familiar with. Now, in the Metelli, he went, and I don't know, maybe he read the writing on the wall. Maybe he realized there was going to be some kind of controversy. I don't know. And so he took it upon himself to replace those cards. So I know that the two that are standing have less value or are less important in rank, and the two that are seated are more important. So we have the standing religious one, we have the standing secular, we have the seated secular, and we have the seated religious. This is by 1650, 1660. In the Bolognese, Al Mondo, we have the four Moors, as we do in the El Soldato. And I am not sure that I have them in the correct order, but I think in a way it's less important because when these cards were to show up in a game, they were given the same numeric value because they were so totally politically correct. And the last card that was played, if four players each had one of these kind of cards, the person who had the last one took the trick. But we do see certain clues, like here we have a sun and here we have a moon. So it might be argued that one of these, represented the female pope, but no, not really, I don't know. And then we have it here in the Al Soldato. But even, well, these do vary, don't they? Well, I don't have them in the proper order, but these do seem to vary a bit. And in the modern cards, they don't have people of color. They just have those four cards represented. But I don't even know who they are. Okay, moving on. We have the lovers. Now, I think it would have been lovers, plural, because I don't think it became the lover until the French. So we have clearly some type of match being made, right? The couple stands before a fountain. Cupid is slinging his arrow toward the feminine person. But not much has changed. I mean, the recipe is pretty much the same as it continues to be in this modern day depiction. So it seems like the Bolognese decks, didn't change that much. And there were some variations. And of course, Metelli did his own thing. I mean, here we just have the concept of love with Cupid. He's blindfolded. He's got his bow and arrows. He's got a flaming heart. But, Metelli did his own thing. So I'm trying not to get these all confused. But I will, so never mind. No point in trying to keep it straight. I'll have to deal with it later. Okay, now we get to the chariot. Again, the Della Torre, the Al Mondo, the El Soldato, and the modern card, from what we can see above the halfway point, all have the same recipe. He's not holding anything in his own. He doesn't have an orb in his hand, but he does have the sword in the modern day. But they're so, so similar. So, so similar. Now, I haven't been showing you, and where did they get to? Oh, Lord have mercy. Dear goodness, if they had teeth, they'd have bitten me. I haven't been showing the Zoni and the Angelovala because you'll see that they're so similar. They're dissimilar. Now, these dates are 1780, 1790. So now they're past the point of the Four Moors, right? So I think it's a case of the decks, we go back to the female pope and the empress and the pope, right? So it seems like we go back to that tradition. So I think, talk about cross-pollination, even though the Italians invented the game, I think the French took the game, made it really fashionable, and then reintroduced it to Italy, who just absorbed the cards a la the French tradition. And that's what I think we have in both the Zoni and then the Vala, Angelo Vala, or the Tarot of Trieste. I think by then it was cross-pollinated by what was going on over in France. And so these two decks, even though they're from Bologna, have quite a Marseille flavor, I think, to them. And I could be wrong. And I'm sure somebody will point it out to me. So forgive me, but that's just my thought on the because they're later, they're 1780 and 1790, something like that. So here we are with the Fina della Torre, the Al Mondo, Fort Justice, or did I skip? I don't think I did. Okay. For the Justice card. And I guess I skipped I think I might have messed up over here a little bit, so please forgive me. Okay, and then we have, this looks like he is the charioteer. Oh no, this is temperance somehow. Okay, so there's a different sequential order, and the modern playing cards has the sequential order. I don't have them in order. These decks don't have the order written on them, the numbers. So I believe we have Justice. Oh no, that's temperance too. Oh Lord have mercy. See, I can't see what I'm doing without my glasses. I have a distinct disadvantage. Thank you for being so nice. I think I have Justice now. Again, the Chariot's a little bit different in the Metelli. Now here we have Justice in the Metelli. She's standing. She's definitely doing her own thing. And these four, pretty similar. Same nod of the head. The modern one does not have a orb in her hand, but she does have the scales, of course, and she has a sword. And the scales seem to be hanging from the orb, which we don't have in the modern deck. And you'll notice all the dots in the sword. I mean, maybe it was very convenient to just, I don't know. See, I don't know what those, because how would they know that the dots would line up with the sword unless it was on the layer that had the sword? And then we have the dots up here. We have the dots. See, it makes sense if you figure, well, I got to put glue on. I might as well make it part of the decoration. But I don't know. So we have the Della Torre. We have the El Mundo. We have the El Soldato. Again, even to the bric-a-brac of her hem or whatever that is, it's the same. Even what's on her lap, it's the same. So it didn't change its recipe. It maintained its recipe. And then this, I think, my thought is that it just absorbed the French tradition because it's less familiar than the others. Okay, so we have a very traditional yeah, we got the temperance card out of whack. Okay, so we have, it seems in keeping with the early Italian decks, right? We have the old man, he's got his crutches, he's got the wings of virtue, he's got the pillar behind him, he's got a beard. He doesn't have an hourglass, does he? I don't see one. So he doesn't have an hourglass here. So the Bolognese, they weren't putting they didn't have the hourglass or the lantern. Which is kind of interesting. Unless it's there and I just don't see it because I'm blind, but I don't think I see it. So the decks out of Bologna really seem to be kind of like they had a formula and they stuck to it with rare exceptions, the Metelli being one. But even he is kind of in keeping. I mean, at least he has the crutches and he has the wings. And he's old. And then, of course, the Zoni and the Angelo Valla, or the Tarot of Trieste, again looks more like it's French. So this, by 1780, 1790, the cross-pollination from France came into Italy, which I think is so kind of cool to see that. Okay, the Wheel of Fortune. Again, these three, really similar. Recipe didn't change much. Same angle of the dangling foot in all examples. It's just, crazy. Really didn't change much. But of course, the Metelli, innovative. Had his own idea. And I apologize for the blue painter's tape. That obviously does not belong on the deck. It's just that I get heckled and I'm tired of it. So until this culture that I'm living in changes and we get rid of the regime who has this phony baloney religious posture, I got to protect myself. So I guess I'm just getting repetitive, but I think, I don't know, I think it's very interesting to see these beautiful decks. Here we have Fortitude, and we have it with a column. And we saw that in some of the other decks that I showed from, I don't even remember what region. Was it Florence? There was a column. Excuse me for slurping. I just had my tea. So we have, yeah, the column. Courage, strength, fortitude. Again, more like the French. Again, not in keeping with the columns of Bologna from the earlier decks. But these two are kind of similar. And I've done a side-by-side of the Angelo Valla and the Zoni decks. I've done a side-by-side. And I've compared the Angelo Valla deck of Trieste with the Marshmallow. So I've done all of those comparisons. And I might have even compared some of these decks to each other, but it's been a while, and this is now a different type of video. So the Hanged One, same. Even to the columns being kind of wrapped, right? He appears to be barefoot in all of them, but I could be wrong. And the hanging foot is barefoot, maybe? But no, it's kind of hard to see. But it seems like it, but that's who knows. But even like the columns being kind of wrapped in spiral, even in the center, you know? Even in the center, there's a nib or something. So, and the clothing, everything, it didn't change all that much. And to backtrack a little bit, and I apologize for messing that up, the Metelli also has a column. So that is a nod to the column. But quite different, right? And of course, the Metelli's Hanged Man, or the one that's being punished for treason, is quite different. And then we have a hanged man that we would be able to recognize whether it was in an Italian deck or a French deck, but it just seems like it's more in keeping with what we see from France. Plus, it's written in French. Whereas in the Italian decks, you know, that's another thing I didn't mention, is we're not seeing the words. Oh, I love how the Fina della Torre and the El Mundo and the El Soldato show death coming in like he is in a parade. Man, he's just happy to be there. Again, hasn't changed all that much. But he's different in the Metelli, which is in an innovative. He has a scythe. He has an hourglass. He has a pyramid. So he's showing, you know, the passage of time and what it does to a human. I skipped a few of these. But even in the modern playing card, up until, you know, that's that point, it's pretty much the same. If you hear a man's voice, it's my husband. I apologize. We've been without heat off and on for about 2 weeks. It comes, it goes. We had a perfectly fine operating furnace, just for those of you who might be in the same situation. The furnace was fine, but we had it inspected, and, you know, because we get inspections once a year, and when they came out to inspect it, the company that inspected it said, Well, the humidifier section or part of your furnace is not working. You could get it or not. And my husband thought, yeah, let's get it, because my wife has really dry skin. I mean, we didn't really discuss it, but he made an executive decision, I think based on, wanting to have the house be a little less dry. So we had someone come out to repair the humidifier. Well, that was like 2 weeks ago. And since that time, we've lost heat at least 3 times in the course of that week. And we never got the humidity up past like 25%. So they came out, it cost us $500. Cost us $500 to have them repair the humidifier. The humidity never went up. And we've lost heat. The furnace itself no longer works properly. So they haven't been charging us. We've been calling them, like, come in and, you screwed this up. We haven't used those words, but we're about to. They haven't been charging us, which is a blessing, but they shouldn't have been, which is good. But we spent $500, and the thing that they supposedly fixed didn't get fixed. So, it's kind of aggravating. So here, getting back, that was my tangent. Getting back on track, we have a death card, which is more in keeping with what we see out of Marseille, right? Or France, rather, excuse me. Not on a horse. And then we see the individuals, skulls on the ground. This one is crowned, I think. One of them is crowned. Let me pause so you don't hear my husband talking. Well, I can't pause it for much longer because the sun is going down. It's only 2:30, but it's almost 2:30, but it looks like it's getting darker. But at any rate, so please forgive me if you hear my husband in the background. Oh, shit. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to say that. Shucks. Okay, temperance. A seated feminine figure. Across the board. Even in the modern one. Oh, it's a little different in the modern one. Her head is postured in another direction, and we don't know if she's seated or not because the card is cropped there, so we don't know. But we have a very pleasant face across the board. We have a sun in each corner or some kind of pretty decorative thing. Even the pattern of the fabric draped on her lap is the same. These two have the same kind of thing going across her lap, and this one's a little different. But by and large, pretty much exactly the same recipe. And here we come to the devil. Okay, before the devil, these two. And I'm just showing these because, they're so different from the traditional, the earlier Bolognese decks that I just want to show. The cross-pollination, I think, from France. And then the Metelli. Not seated at all, standing. Okay, now we have the devil. A real fire and brimstone kind of guy. He's got a snake tongue, lack of virtue in his wings, the same kind of tail curled up and stuff, and even very similar. He looks like the creature from the Black Lagoon over here. And Metelli outdid them. He's got a fire and brimstone devil, but this one, man, this must have put the heebie-jeebies because it's so cool. That's a really cool devil. And then here, again, very similar to French. The Tower of the Dallatorre clan has lightning striking it, or it was struck by something, or there could be the fire from within because, well, we do see something coming from the sky, right? That does look like it's connecting to the sky. It could be. So it could either be a strike that caused this or that it's coming from within. And we do have two people on the ground. Yeah, I don't know what we have here. I don't see anything deliberately coming from the sky. So there could be a case in point that these cards from Bologna do not have a lightning strike. We do have two suns, though, or two decorative things in the corners that look like suns. Maybe they were mistaken as suns or a sun in later decks. Maybe they weren't suns at all. Maybe they were just decorative motifs because we see them in some of the other cards, which is interesting. When you see, we see two suns or two things in the corners. So that could have just been a decorative motif. It's not in all of them. The ones that lend themselves to having something in the corners, though, not all of them, so I can't speak on that. And look how abstract this one becomes. And there is no sun, or there's nothing to show that it came from above. So the tower itself is on fire and there are no people. And then in the case of the Zoni and the Angelo Valla, it's keeping with the French tradition, and it's really clear that there's something, probably TDM2, not TDM1, but something is coming from the sky, a lightning bolt, and people are falling. So I don't know, I just think it's so cool to just look at decks every now and then and just compare what we got. Just look at what we got. And then, of course, the Metelli did something completely different and just has somebody being struck by lightning. May God strike me dead if I'm not telling the truth. So completely different. As is the star in the case of the Metelli, which looks an awful lot like the Hermit in the French tradition, but this is the star card. And I say it seems an awful lot like the Hermit in the French tradition because he's got a lantern. It kind of looks similar. But this is the star card. It's about the star. So let's take a look at these guys. Over here, we got the star. Again, didn't change their recipe. From 1625, 50-ish to 1750, did not change the recipe. Even here, the three people. With the 8-pointed star. But by the time of Zoni and Angelo Valla, or the Tarot of Trieste, we see the French, well, what I associate with the French pattern of TDM, 1 and 2. We have the sign of Aquarius. Now, that's not to say that, the French did not invent tarot, right? So any images that they had, they got it on something they saw. But by this time, 1780, 1790, and when it was, if it was being reintroduced back to Italy, then even if this was an earlier Italian innovation, which I don't know that it was, I'm just saying even if it were, now it takes on a more decidedly French, flavor. But I don't think in the case of the Bolognese that it was, because it seems like this, even today, right? This was the style of the star in the Bolognese tradition. So it's not, I'm not getting it that the sign of Aquarius was a hot design topic in traditional Bologna depictions of the star. Okay, we have the moon. Astrologers or astronomers with their calipers. Again, they have these things in the corner. So in the tower, when we have the thing in the corner, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was anything coming from the heavens, right? So if TDM 1 or 2 saw that as something coming from the sky or coming from the heavens, maybe it was a confusion because maybe it was just a decorative motif in the corners. I mean, that's possible. And they thought it was the sun, and so they copied the sun and they put a lightning strike. Because there was an association with lightning, because the tower card may really have always only been about lightning, right? And, if it struck a tower, it's only because it was depicted that way because lightning struck towers or they struck trees. It struck trees, right? Anyway, here we have the moon. Not front facing, but kind of, almost. It's not a profile. In here, more in keeping with the French, right? Now, that's not to say that the French weren't, they definitely were familiar with the Italian decks, or else they wouldn't have had a tarot deck, right? Because their tarot deck is based on their familiarity with what came out of Italy, right? Stands to reason since Italy, invented the game. But who's to say, who borrowed from who? Because even in Italy, we can't decide completely, A court may have hired somebody from Florence, and so, like, if somebody from Venice, may have hired an artist from Florence, and so we see it as, we think, well, it's from Venice, but the art looks like it's Florentine, so because it's cross-pollination. Not to mention the style of clothing, styles of clothing would have given away location also, and time stamps. If somebody were to do a tarot deck today, like a modern day deck, right, based on clothing, like something like maybe the Housewives Tarot or something like that, I don't know, but a contemporary deck like that, in 200, 300 years, maybe they'll be able to place when that deck was created if they no longer knew, because maybe somebody will have archived clothing, styles of, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. Okay, so here we have, what do we have here? The sun. Now, in the Via Veal, where we have this, the woman with the thread in the moon, here we have it in the sunshine, right? Because, it stands to reason that if you spin thread, you're going to do it when you can see it. But at some point in the French tradition, some of the decks had a woman spinning thread in the dark. Now, it could be argued it was a deliberate choice, maybe because they felt like it was women's work, and so they associated the moon with women, and maybe that was a deliberate thing, or maybe it was a mistake. Here we have the modern playing card. So clearly, the tradition of a woman spinning thread and its onset was in the sun, not in the dark of the moon. And here we have, I missed the sun. I missed the moon. My apologies. Here's the moon. Diana of Metelli, and Apollo for the sun. So he definitely did his own thing. Okay, now, the penultimate card. I know that the world in the Bolognese tradition comes before the judgment card, and that's why I love it so much. So here we have the world, the world, the world, the world. Is that the world? No, that's judgment, my bad. I don't have the world for some reason of the modern one. But they, the Bolognese, they stuck to a formula, and that's what they liked, They kept it. And Metelli has his own thing going on with the world, and I interpret this differently than sometimes, you can have the whole world, right? Like you think you have the whole world in his hands, or whatever. But that looks like a huge burden. So it takes on a different meaning for me to see it like that. Okay, and the ultimate card of the deck in the Bolognese tradition, we have Judgment. Doesn't change much, even in the modern day. And it's a little bit different in the Metelli. So the Bolognese tradition knew what it liked, and it stuck with it. That's what it seems like to me, at least in this 100-year window that we have. It's not, it hasn't changed much. And then here we have those cards. But even though this is a deck created in Bologna, right? It has the French. That's not the Italian tradition. It's not the Bolognese order. So even if they were to play with the deck in modern day times, if they were to play with this deck, I guess they wouldn't. They would play with a deck that looked like this, right? But they would still have the world card as the penultimate card. So I hope you found it interesting and not too confusing. I tried my best not to make this confusing, but it is confusing because I have so many decks, and if I have any Bolognese decks that came before these, they slip my mind, and I guess I'll just have to point it out in another video. But I think these are my earliest Bolognese decks. And if I have any others that come from any region that is more modern than the early ones that I've shown, I will put them in the playlist. And, I'm just saying, just noticing the next card, which is the Ace of Swords, right? Bear in mind, if you see this motif, it looks like a Bolognese flourish. So far in the swords, I haven't been showcasing the pips, really. And this is already at almost an hour, so I'm not going to showcase them. But, it'll be interesting, I guess, to look at the pips quickly. The pips... Let's use this one, it's smaller. We know it isn't much different. So we just have what we're accustomed to seeing, which could have made it to France, which is why we have similar in France. We have some similar and some not so similar configurations. And here we have a different ace, a little different, a baton. Anyway, I hope you found it interesting. I did. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be brave, be kind, show up, speak up, and vote. I haven't mentioned it in recent videos because I'm trying to collect myself and not present a fearful or defiant, either way, face. But things are definitely heated over here. And if you're not taking a position and you're not vocalizing your position, you're not going to help the cause. So at the very least, the least any of us can do is to make sure we're responsible enough to vote. And if we're in a position to be able to protest, then we need to protest. We need to get out and do it. Tuesday, January 20. Find out where there's a place near you. If you can do it, do it.